The Galactic Council chamber thrummed with the low vibration of power, a sound meant to remind every species present that this place had ruled unchallenged for millennia. Delegates in polished armor and layered ceremonial robes sat in curved tiers, confident eyes watching holographic projections of Earth, as if studying a misbehaving pet. They spoke with the assured tone of beings who believed history always bent in their favor. Humanity, to them, was another rising species that needed to be guided, restrained, and shaped until it fit neatly inside the Council's carefully engineered order. Their analysts displayed charts predicting human growth, innovation curves, economic independence, and military expansion. Each metric climbed far more rapidly than any species they had previously absorbed. The Council found this deeply inconvenient. Humanity's drive, imagination, and refusal to conform made them unpredictable. Their creativity ignored boundaries. Their ambition refused ceilings. Worse, humans had developed cultural values centered on personal liberty, dissent, individuality, and the belief that authority must earn respect rather than demand it. To the Council, this wasn't just reckless, it was dangerous. They murmured among themselves, calling humans impulsive, stubborn, volatile, and uncontrollable. Some compared humans to a wildfire that needed to be contained before it spread. Others insisted humans were simply another species that needed to be reminded who controlled the galaxy. A few nervous delegates, recalling humanity's rapid adaptation during first contact, advised caution. They were quickly dismissed. Fear, after all, was not something the Council allowed itself to feel. A vote was held, swift and unanimous. The Human Regulation Act passed without resistance. The Council believed Earth would fall in line just as dozens of worlds had done before. Sanctions would limit Terran trade. Travel restrictions would slow human expansion. Technology barriers would halt their momentum. If Earth complained, the Council would offer diplomacy. If Earth resisted, they would apply pressure. If Earth rebelled, they would call it a security threat and send a fleet. They congratulated themselves for choosing a measured and civilized approach. Not one delegate considered the possibility that humans would not follow the script. When the act was formally transmitted to the United Terran Coalition, the Council expected outrage, protests, and frantic pleas for negotiation. Those reactions were common, predictable, manageable. Instead, they received a single transmission, a calm, steady voice projected into the entire chamber. It was unmistakably human, confident, grounded, and unshaken. "We acknowledge your decision," the message began. "But understand this clearly. Humans do not submit to control. Not from kings. Not from conquerors. Not from councils. If your goal is to regulate our potential, you will fail. If your goal is to limit our future, you will fail. If your goal is to command us, try." The chamber fell silent. There was no anger in the message. No panic. No aggression. Just certainty. A certainty that unsettled even the most arrogant among them. Humans were supposed to be loud and emotional. Instead, they spoke with the quiet conviction of a species utterly confident in its own path. Council members tried to laugh it off, calling it empty bravado. They insisted humanity would break under pressure. They always did. Every species broke eventually. But their amusement faded when the first anomalies appeared. Within hours of the act being announced, all Terran ships vanished from monitored trade lanes. Human colonies near Council borders ceased broadcasting. Orbital stations that should have been in plain sight could no longer be detected. Their entire logistical network went dark, silent, invisible. The Council ordered immediate scans. Fleets were dispatched. Analysts searched for irregularities. But the answer was the same everywhere. Humans were there one moment and gone the next. That was when the message replayed again, unprompted, echoing through the chamber with chilling clarity. "You think you can control us? You cannot! We will determine our own future. If you wish to test the strength of our spirit, we will not hide. But understand this, every attempt to restrict us will only reveal what you fear most." The transmission ended, leaving the Council facing a truth they had never confronted before. Humanity wasn't intimidated. Humanity wasn't negotiating. Humanity wasn't afraid. They were preparing. Humanity's silence became the Council's first real problem. No retaliatory threats. No desperate protests. No diplomatic outbursts. The Terran coalition simply vanished from predictable behavior patterns, and that absence created more fear than open defiance ever could. Council intelligence agencies monitored human trade routes, expecting collapse. Instead, the routes emptied without a single distress signal. Worlds that relied on Terran shipments adapted instantly, as if preparations had been made long before sanctions were even announced. Economic models predicting human instability failed within the first day. Reports flowed in from covert agents stationed near Earth, each one adding confusion. Human industries weren't scrambling, they were reorganizing. Mega factories shifted production from consumer goods to modular components with unknown purposes. Research stations that once broadcast open scientific data sealed their networks entirely, adopting encryption far beyond what the Council believed humans capable of producing. Shipyards dismantled older vessels and replaced them with hull designs that didn't match any known propulsion signature. Every action was deliberate, coordinated, and rapid. Nothing about it resembled panic. Council analysts insisted humans were overreacting, but their own data contradicted them. Human energy usage rose dramatically, yet no corresponding emissions or heat signatures were detected. Terran communication traffic decreased by almost 70%, replaced by a pattern of compressed silent packets the Council's most advanced decryption algorithms couldn't unpack. Human behavior, once noisy and easy to monitor, had become impossibly efficient. The Council dispatched reconnaissance fleets to conduct harmless inspections, under the pretext of maintaining trade stability. These fleets found abandoned orbital platforms, empty habitats, and silent listening posts. Entire installations once bustling with Terran activity were stripped down to metallic skeletons, meticulously cleaned of all data. Even power conduits had been removed. It wasn't an evacuation, it was a calculated erasure. Council envoys demanded explanations from Earth's diplomats. None were provided. Terran response teams operated under a strict pattern: acknowledge transmission, refuse comment, terminate link. No emotion. No argument. No weakness. The lack of reaction unsettled the Council more than open hostility would have. Humans were acting as if they already knew how every Council move would unfold. The real alarm came when fringe systems reported sightings of Terran vessels far outside their established territories. These ships didn't match older registry databases. Their hulls were sleeker, darker, reinforced with materials the Council couldn't identify. They moved with unnatural precision, performing microjumps inside gravitational wells thought impossible to navigate. Sensors recorded them only for seconds before they slipped away again. Some observers compared them to shadows that learned to fly. Attempts to intercept these vessels failed repeatedly. Pursuing cruisers would detect a fleeting distortion, then lose contact entirely. Council captains saw no weapon signatures, no communication exchanges, no aggressive maneuvers, just the unsettling truth that the Terran fleet was evolving beyond their understanding. In strategy meetings, senior Council members argued that humanity might be sabotaging Council infrastructure. But there were no attacks. No hacking incidents. No disruptions. Humans were preparing for something, yet they hadn't harmed anyone. That restraint terrified the Council. Aggressive species followed patterns, threats, build-up, escalation. Humans displayed none of those signals. Their silence disguised intent. One report described a human research convoy drifting near a restricted nebula. Before the Council patrol could approach, the convoy vanished behind a burst of electromagnetic interference that didn't match any known technology. When the disturbance cleared, no trace of the ships remained. Not even ion trails. It was as if the convoy had dissolved into empty space. Council leadership convened emergency sessions, attempting to predict the next human step. But each new measure failed. Every model produced contradictory outcomes. The Council's greatest frustration was the realization that humanity had stopped playing by rules. They weren't behaving like a rising species. They were behaving like a hidden power emerging from beneath a mask they had worn for generations. The clearest sign arrived when a Council intelligence vessel intercepted a faint Terran transmission from a remote system. It contained only a single encrypted sentence. After hours of processing, the message decrypted itself without warning. Observation phase complete. Nothing more. The Council froze, suddenly aware they were no longer the ones watching. Humanity was. The Council interpreted humanity's silence as a provocation rather than a warning. Their pride couldn't tolerate the idea that a younger species had slipped beyond their influence. In response, they escalated. Patrol fleets were ordered to position themselves around former Terran trade corridors, forming a loose ring of what they called stabilizing presence. The Council claimed it was for security, but everyone in the chamber understood the purpose: intimidation. They believed a visible show of strength would pressure Earth into submission. Terran leaders said nothing. Their silence deepened, and that silence forced the Council into its next mistake. A formal decree demanded that all Terran vessels submit to random inspections. Humans ignored it. No acknowledgement. No compliance. Instead, merchant ships simply stopped appearing on Council-monitored routes. It was as if humanity had folded its entire economy inward, functioning without external support. Technologies previously shared openly with other species were withdrawn. Human scientists who once debated theories across public forums vanished behind encrypted research networks. Every doorway that once connected them to the Council closed with quiet finality. The Council's frustration evolved into anxiety when a blockade fleet attempted to intercept a Terran courier near the Karana's expanse. The fleet deployed interdiction fields, locked firing solutions, and began standard procedures. The courier did nothing aggressive. It simply shifted direction, aligned with a gravitational ripple from a nearby cluster, and executed a micro-jump that should have torn it apart. Instead, it disappeared cleanly, leaving the blockade with nothing to pursue. Council engineers insisted the maneuver was physically impossible. Yet humans had done it with an older model vessel. If that wasn't enough, reports surfaced from frontier outposts of Terran Marines appearing aboard stations without triggering entry protocols. No breaches. No alarms. No violence. They moved through corridors quietly, leaving behind sealed data cubes addressed to station commanders. Each cube contained a single message: "We will not be directed or contained." The Marines then left as silently as they arrived. Council security investigators found no evidence of how they infiltrated those facilities. It was the kind of precision only mastered by a species accustomed to thinking sideways. Alien leaders began questioning whether the Council had underestimated humanity's unity. Terran populations across their worlds adopted the same disciplined posture. No riots. No disarray. No fractures. Humanity acted like a single organism with billions of coordinated components, each aware of its role. That level of alignment unsettled species who depended on rigid hierarchies and predictable behaviors. The Council grew desperate to regain control. They broadcast declarations promising amnesty if humans returned to compliance. No reply. They tried to manipulate Terran allies. Allies refused. They attempted to pressure neutral species. Those species began distancing themselves, whispering that humanity seemed to wield some invisible advantage. In a final attempt to force submission, the Council ordered the Consolidated Armada to enforce a hard blockade around former Terran regions. Warships formed dense, overlapping formations. Drones patrolled every corridor of space. The Council believed this would corner humanity into responding. Humans responded by destroying their own infrastructure. Terran FTO gates, which connected major colonized systems, were dismantled in perfect synchronization. Orbital rings were taken apart. Navigation beacons were intentionally erased. The Council interpreted it as madness. Why would a species willingly destroy its own routes? But strategic analysts soon realized the truth. Humans were removing every point the Council could use to control or corner them. By destroying their own structures, they created a battlefield with no predictable geometry, giving them absolute mobility while denying it to their enemies. Council admirals faced a problem no simulation had ever prepared them for, an opponent who refused every rule, every assumption, every expected reaction. A species that would burn down its own house just to stop someone else from locking the doors. The Council tried interpreting this as desperation, but deep down their commanders sensed the truth. Humans weren't acting out of fear. They were clearing the board. Terran leadership issued one final encrypted broadcast to all Council fleets. If conflict is what you choose, understand that we will not fight for dominance. We fight only for freedom. And beings who fight for freedom cannot be contained. Everything after that message became inevitable. The Consolidated Armada advanced with absolute confidence, a wall of metal and authority moving toward what they believed would be a swift correction. Their ships stretched across light hours, layered in disciplined formations perfected over centuries. Commanders reassured themselves that humanity, despite its unpredictability, could not withstand the overwhelming force of the unified Council military. They expected resistance. They expected fear. They expected a panicked species scrambling to defend itself. Instead, they entered silence. The first Council battle groups emerging near former Terran space detected no active outposts, no civilian stations, no defensive grids. The region felt abandoned. What unnerved them was not the emptiness itself but the precision of it. Every structure was dismantled in such a clean, deliberate manner that no debris fields remained. Astrogation points were erased. Every navigational marker that once defined Terran territory no longer existed. The Council had prepared for confrontation. Humanity had prepared a void. Armada Command attempted standard sweeps, expecting hidden warships. Sensors found only faint electromagnetic distortions drifting along the periphery. At first they were dismissed as background noise, until the distortions started tracking fleet movements. Council technicians tightened skin resolution, only to watch the anomalies scatter like shadows avoiding a spotlight. Nothing behaved like a natural phenomenon. It was as if something was observing them from behind a veil they couldn't penetrate. The first strike came without warning. A command cruiser lost all power in an instant, every system collapsing simultaneously without triggering alarms. The ship floated dead, drifting through the void while the rest of the Armada scrambled to compensate. Before recovery teams could respond, a second cruiser went dark. Then a third. No explosions. No beams. No hull damage. Only absolute silence overtaking ships designed to withstand supernova shockwaves. Council captains ordered countermeasures, but the enemy never revealed itself. Human vessels flickered into existence only for fractions of a second, dark, angular silhouettes with hull patterns that seemed to absorb light. They moved with a fluid, predatory grace, executing trajectories that defied predictive models. By the time a sensor locked onto their position, they were already gone, leaving behind only disrupted telemetry. Admirals demanded explanations. Strategists proposed theories ranging from prototype stealth drives to gravitational tunneling. None matched the evidence. Even their best cyber defense officers couldn't comprehend the precision of the infiltrations. Entire networks shut down simultaneously, their cores overwritten by an untraceable algorithm that erased itself after activation. No species had ever manipulated systems across multiple ships with such speed. Humans had rewritten the rules of space warfare. The Armada tried to reorganize, but every adjustment played into Terran calculations. A formation shift caused power failures in targeted vessels. A sensor sweep resulted in misaligned propulsion arrays. Defensive drones drifted out of position as if dragged by invisible currents. It wasn't brute force, it was surgical interference, executed with terrifying mastery. And then, at last, the Terran fleet revealed itself. Thousands of human ships emerged at once, not with dramatic flares but with precise, cold coordination. They surrounded the Armada in perfect silence. No weapons primed. No demands issued. Their formation alone conveyed the message. They had been following every Council movement from the start. Humanity had mapped the Armada, understood its tactics, and dismantled its advantages before the Council even realized the battle had begun. A single human transmission cut through every channel simultaneously. We warned you. Freedom cannot be taken. It is defended. Council commanders braced for annihilation, expecting humanity to unleash the overwhelming firepower they had demonstrated in flashes. Instead, Terran ships disabled weapons, engines, and command nodes across the Armada without firing a lethal shot. They treated the Council's greatest military force the way a surgeon handles an injury: precisely, efficiently, without unnecessary harm. The Armada collapsed. Not destroyed. Defeated by a foe that chose restraint over conquest. When the Council attempted to initiate retaliatory commands, they found their networks overwritten. Human override protocols broadcast a final message to every ship. You sought to control us. We choose only to be free. And freedom does not require your destruction, only your recognition. As the Terran fleet vanished back into silent space, the Council finally understood the most frightening truth: humanity had never been fighting for power. They had been fighting for the right to never kneel. The Council summoned what remained of its leadership to a crisis summit, though the word, summit, no longer carried its former weight. Their authority, once unquestioned, now felt like brittle glass under a strain they hadn't foreseen. The defeat of the consolidated Armada had broken something deeper than military pride. It shattered the illusion that they understood the galaxy they claimed to govern. Delegates entered the chamber with the heaviness of beings who had glimpsed the edge of their own relevance. Their voices were subdued, stripped of their usual arrogance. They expected humanity to arrive with demands. Historically, victorious species sought compensation, territory, or political control. The Council prepared for negotiations that would end with Earth claiming large swaths of space or imposing crippling conditions. Instead, humanity requested only one thing: a direct meeting. No escorts. No ceremonial ranks. No power displays. A single Terran vessel arrived outside the Council's capital system, transmitting a calm message requesting entry. Its appearance was unarmed, its hull unadorned, and yet its presence carried a gravity that unsettled every sensor officer monitoring it. Inside the chamber, delegates braced themselves for retaliation disguised as diplomacy. When the Terran representative appeared via projection, there was no hostility. No triumph. Only a composed certainty that contrasted sharply with the Council's shaken posture. The human began by acknowledging the Council's long history, and the order it had maintained. There was no mockery in the words, only a recognition of what had been. But that acknowledgement transitioned into a truth the Council had spent centuries refusing to confront. Order enforced through domination was not stability. It was fear disguised as governance. The human made it clear humanity had no interest in replacing the Council's rule with their own. They had not dismantled the Armada to conquer, nor disabled fleets to seize planets. They acted because freedom, to them, was non-negotiable. Control offered under the guise of security was still control, and humans would never accept it from any power, no matter how ancient. Their voice held the unmistakable weight of a species that had walked through fire and emerged with clarity rather than vengeance. Delegates exchanged confused glances. They expected threats. They received principles. They expected ultimatums. They received a declaration. Humanity intended to exist in the galaxy as an independent force beholden to no council, empire, or collective. They would defend themselves, but they would not dominate others. Their strength was not meant to rule but to ensure no one could ever rule them. This idea was so alien to the Council that some struggled to understand it. Strength not used to control was, in their minds, wasted. But the human clarified, choosing not to rule was the ultimate demonstration of strength. Self-restraint was power without the need for chains. As the representative continued, transmissions across dozens of systems indicated that non-council species were listening secretly. They heard humanity describe a galaxy where freedom was not a privilege handed down by higher powers but a universal right that existed regardless of authority. Alien civilians who had lived under the Council's hierarchical oversight for generations felt something shift, an awakening that no decree could silence. Some Council delegates sensed this and grew increasingly uneasy. They realized humanity had done more than defeat their military. It had exposed the Council's foundation as a construct upheld by compliance rather than legitimacy. The human ended their message not with a threat but with a reassurance. Terran fleets would withdraw completely, taking no spoils. They would not interfere in the Council's internal affairs. Their battle had never been for domination. It was for the restoration of a truth the Council had forgotten. Power meant responsibility, not entitlement. When the projection faded, the chamber remained quiet. Delegates felt the weight of a galaxy that was already changing around them. No enemy had ever defeated them without demanding tribute. No victor had ever walked away without carving new borders. Humanity had done both, and in doing so, they had taken something far more valuable than territory. They had claimed moral authority without seeking it. Alien worlds began to question why the Council held the right to control them when a species powerful enough to conquer the galaxy refused to control anyone. In the days that followed, messages spread across star systems, repeating a single Terran sentence that ignited hope, fear, and awe in equal measure. They wanted to command us. We showed them freedom. And from that moment forward, every species understood why humanity could not be controlled, because they didn't fight for domination. They fought for the right to stand unbound.